site in front of you. For the most part, I'm able to get the top header and these pieces of information and the links and the keys. They're all dynamic, and I'm going to make SQL build this component, and that should be enough to at least get me 900 pages built by SQL. So for each table, this is going to change, and then the columns will change, but for the most part everything will be the same. So I already have this component structure set up, and I'm just kind of adding data. I actually have token replacement happening right now, so when I run for a particular data set, when I run this code, it'll start making most of my functions, except for I gotta figure out why that's happening, but yep. From my icons, the layout, everything. Cat this morning. Given to links to other pieces of the documentation. So yeah, I will figure out, oh, this is probably because the information is not supplied, but the function itself, I'm curious as to why that is not happening. So I'm going to debug that before I start making the table component. So in my component list, this same component structure is going to be the component structure that helps me dissect Stock API information to load it into the system, but see this function main export component 46. I want to go ahead and see what that name is. Oh, it's going to take its time. There we go. 46 has a data set name. So I'm curious, maybe it's just not attached to a token. So it doesn't look like 46 is attached to a token. It gets a little crazy understanding what each type means, but I know type ID 8 means that this is a top level component, and this is a parent component, and this is a child component, and this represents the token, where it is in the JSON and what key name we should replace it with. I also remember from doing this that 132 is the data set, so I should be able to copy one of these records, say, hey, I forgot to mention that 46 had a token attached to it. Submit or commit, run. And still nothing. All right. Let's see for function. Export default component name primary. This is the component name. 46 is data set name. So that should be concatenating that information, name type ID, component name. So let me see if what it's returning. So that should be working. So 132 should be my data set. Yep. token replacement, data set name, database name, file name. Get the component. Let's see, 446 and 8. I get data set name. Alrighty, that's the path for the token. That's the key name. That's a replacement. That's the value. The path is null. Actually, I'm gonna come back to this because some of these are also messing up. Is it just data set name? Let's do this. Possibility it has something to do with the payload. Yep, that's right. It's the payload. Whoa. Well, there's two things. One, I did not actually add that token to that component, but number two is that I don't have the required information in here. So I say this will all be filled out by the system, but oh. There we go. It's just I didn't include this. It's because what's going to happen is this is going to run for each table, and I'm kind of making a list of the different items in the payload that I will need to retrieve for every specific table. So at least we got component and event taken care of. We don't have data set description because it may not be described properly. Let's do it this way. So I have a token. It's called data set description. There we go. So that should 33. Data set's description should have a path. Path is ID 3, so 133 should have given us a path, but looks like I did not describe that. This is this type ID represents a path, where this type ID represents something else. This is for an import. This is for a property value for our React components, like a grid item or a card or a grid container. This particular one is to the is for SQL. SQL will actually add the path, the root path in front of it, and this will tell us where in the payload is our data. It doesn't look like I have one for 133. So I should be able to say for 133, the path to the value is root.dataset description, root.dataset description. And there we go. Now it's starting to populate that data. So for the most part, it looks like as long as I define them, the tokens work. For these right here, that would be for data set realm key name. I'll just do this. So class family type. So these are actually filling out too. Awesome. So currently, these are the pages that are being built by SQL in a not good way. It's all hard-coded, not as dynamic as what I'm converting it to. But all I have to do is format that document and I get something like this. So transaction reference is what I am basically monitoring to make sure everything is looking good. I like how this is laid out. So I'm just filling in the different components. So we want to make this control, this accordion control that has a title, which is also tokenized. It has to call a procedure that returns the dynamic list of columns per data set that's coming in. So this small component is what we will be creating, and it's not really that small. This is actually where we have to start and where we have to end. So I'm going to copy this and kind of get an idea. Let me just get a different window to mess around with. So I want to kind of get an idea of what I need and how that's going to be set up. So I know these will be static, but these will be dynamic. So how I have these set up, let's see if I can go back to another page where these dynamically grow, is as I'm building the component list, there is an option for SQL to essentially take a break from actually building the components and call a procedure. So I have a procedure for the foreign key and the links that will generate, based on the incoming data set ID, find out what keys it has and find out what uses it as a key. So I'm going to take the same approach because each of these components are actually only defined once in the system, because the procedure allows for reuse and not parent-child collision where this child is a child somewhere else and we just start building in really intense trees because it doesn't know that this is a unique component. And that is what I'm going to take. That is the approach I'm going to take with this, is where I'm only going to define one row and then create a procedure. So for each row, call this component, and it'll be tokenized and it'll fill it out and it'll work. Because even in this, like this is the primary procedure that builds the entire React document, all this procedure does is essentially get the required information for that particular data set that is a link or a foreign key and goes back into the fray. Just goes, so it like takes a break, calls this procedure, and then it goes back into the recursion so it can keep running again. It's pretty interesting. So to get this to work, I want side by side. Basically like doing this, where here's the names that I'm going to be using. Anyways, I'll just create a new sheet. And say table documentation. This is the actual data point accordion. So I'm going to call it this giant component, this one component. So, and this is the accordion. This is the grid container. I don't know how many I'll need. So this is the motion. This is the grid item. Call it a 1212 so I don't lose my place. It's the actual accordion. Accordion summary. Inside the summary, we have the title, but it's the H3. Inside the summary, we have the actual header name, I guess, because it's going to be tokenized with columns. Then we'll close out, and then we'll start with details. So accordion details. Inside the details, have a grid container. In the grid container, grid item, again 1212. Table head. Table row. Okay, this is my header section. So column name. Views data point. So when we look at this, we have a table cell component and also some text. So this is two components at the same time. So I have table cell, column name, and we'll work on this in pairs. Column text. 2, 3, 4. So column name, column name, value, column name, view, view value. To be completely honest, it's like I don't have to give it these types of names. I could just randomly generate names, but it kind of helps me figure out the parent-child relationship as I'm trying to build it back up. Data point name, data point name, data point type. And finally, the native. Oh, that was crazy. Okay, so then we end, and then we go into the table body. But this is where I want to, essentially, what I started writing here is I want to take a break from generating this and move over to a procedure that will be more dynamic for me. So I basically want to relate a component that is a procedure to the table body, and that will be the final child in this path. And then this procedure will be called. And this procedure is going to generate table rows. So there's also a component that we have that will not add anything to the overall JSON. It's just like this empty container as like a pass-through. It will not affect the overall JSON. So we want to documentation data point, give it a key name, and how that's used is just like this, where we're going to call this procedure, come in and figure out what root component block that we need, parent-child block that we need, and then it'll iterate through something and continually call that block to fill it out per item. So you get this really extensible piece of code instead of doing it like this. But this really does represent a very specific format. This format is not going to change. This is more of a dynamic format. So now that we have described our root object, then we just have to figure out what is in that root item. So that is our repeated block. So it should be table body root. Table row. Table cell for the data point name. Table cell for the data point name value. View, what it looks like when it appears in a view, the type, the type value, and the native SQL value. I'm adding that just in case people come and want to figure out what is this. Later on I can improve, so you click on this and it brings you to a list. However, having the size right next to it might help a little bit. So we have what it looks like in the table, what it looks like in a view, the user-defined type attached to it, and what that user-defined type translates into as it pertains to SQL. So now that I have this amazing, come on now, oh yeah, this will essentially build the table. So I like Sheets so much, or Excel, is this is going to go into my component table. And I think this is off just a little bit by one column because there's a blank right here, and that will mess things up. So for the most part, all of these are the same. And I believe it goes description, abbreviation, column, key name. I'll prove myself wrong in a few moments. Bam. So I don't want to generate insert statements for all this stuff. I just kind of want to do this. I do have to change the types because not all of these types are accurate. But I do have examples already, so I can just use those examples. Description, abbreviation, column, key name. 1, 2, 3, key name. 1, 2, 3, key name. All right. So I have 18 actual React components. Sometimes I have like declares, constants. Here is the topmost component. This is the table file itself. This is the procedure. So that's 31. And 33 is the root. Now I should rename this because the pattern was so simple. This is for links, and this is for keys. Oh, there are no links in there, are there? Here. Key. Links. Okay. So I'm actually reusing the same underlying template essentially because this grid link button text button link grid is the same as here. Grid link button text button link. So it's exactly the same thing. So I should actually rename this because both of these procedures call this. Anyways, 31 and 33 are what I need. 31 lets the system know that this is a procedure to call. 33 lets the system know that we should not be creating our React component. We should not be creating our React component for this item. So 33 and 34, or 31 and 33. And the rest of this should be just fine. Because is these don't matter, but these do matter. What I also have set up is essentially these are just things where it's going to, it's always going to be the bottom of a node. It's always going to be like that final piece of text. So I think I will create a few more of these for the pieces that do not change, like the value. This is a value that will not change. This is a value that will not change. This is a value that will not change. And this is a value that will not change. However, if I do that, I want to adapt to the current naming schema that I do have, where this is a self-contained data point name. Data point name view. Data point type name. And data point type name native SQL. So I know that by doing this record, this naming convention will never have a child. There will never be anything under it. It is the final piece in the kit. So I can skip the first one because I don't need it. Grab this and put all up in here. And I will get my IDs. Remove the first record. And define it. So I have another sheet. This is basically what I do when I want to work on a section. I'll work on that section, and here's the relationship part, and here's the name part, and here's the text part. So I'm going to copy one of these records just because I know what's supposed to happen. And there is actually a pattern behind how we do this for the most part. If we come down to accordion, I know grid to summary H3. So grid to H3 and then the header name. So say this, and these are my child. So just kind of shifting it up one, because I know accordion goes to motion, that goes to grid, that goes to the actual accordion, that goes to the summary, that goes to the title, that goes to 148, the actual name. So I get to remove this because the name is done. Now I have to, in my head, backtrack back up to accordion. So 145 is the accordion, and in there is the details. And the details contains all of this information. Oh, but row. Row's a bit weird, so we'll stop at row. So accordion to summary. Oh. Accordion to summary. Summary to title H3. Title H3 to an actual value. Accordion to details. And copy this again, paste it over here. Details to whatever 150 is, grid container, grid item, etc. We should get to the table row, which is 154. We'll say table row actually goes to multiple things. Let's see if it lets me do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. put a sequence on here, or else I'm going to lose my mind because there's so much. Do base 10 sequences, it just helps. And that means I have to do the same for here. The summary goes first. The details go second. So the sequence is where we're telling it the order. We don't want it to randomly choose what order we get. We want a specific order in how the components are created. So I am relating the table row to each of these cells, and then I copied this data over here to take each of these cells, and now I'm going to attach them to the values. Same pattern, I think. Name value. Yep. Yep. So what we've done so far is essentially just related these. Here's my record 145 that has two things under it: the summary, which goes down, comes back, and the details, which goes down. And the table row 154 has 4 pieces attached to it, so that you see it 4 times. And each of these are just repeated right here for those 4 items. So table head ends. We'll go back up to table. So table is 152. We should have 152 to 153. This is the head. 153 is the table head. And we go back to 152 for the body, which would be the second item. So the body is going to fire its component, so we get the table body component, and then the table body is going to fire a procedure. And that basically ends the chain that we're going to attach to the higher document, the actual data set page, this entire page. Because we're going to make this separation right here, where it's now going to call a procedure. So if we think of it, okay, now we're starting from a new page, a container, just an abstract container. We will have this new container that this won't do anything because it's just a root object. It doesn't have any, properties attached to it. But it has a row, 2, 3, 4, and that row has 4 items attached to it, just like our headers. So those 4 items. Skip. Sweet. And then these 4 items have values attached to them. So 142 is the grid container. If I come in here and say this is where my 142 record is, what is this attached to? If I scroll all the way up, I can say, oh, I have a layout, a card, a body, and then a container. So this card body that I have to find, I actually want to plug it in to attach all these relationships to that item. So I should be able to copy this row. I'm just going to insert one and paste it. I know that 142 will be the child, but I will have to figure out what the parent is, and I believe it's called data like top section. Layout, main, card body, top section, grid container. So it is a sister of the top section grid container. So I want to take the main card body, which is 52. That'll be my second item in the list. So go back to 52, and this will be the second item. All right. The relationships are the same. We're just doing a component parent-child relationship, so all the data is essentially the same. The only thing that changes is who's the parent, who's the child, and what's the sequence. So for the most part, just copying data, pasting data, highlighting data, and putting it in the system. I like, it's probably easier ways. I could develop something, send it a JSON object that will parse it out, figure this out, fill it all out, blah, blah, blah. But at the very beginning, putting this data in here manually kind of gives you the feel of what's the repetitive task. Is if I'm sitting here and I'm going to add the relationships. All right, I added all these relationships. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add the names to the components. I'm going to have to add different relationships because this is a procedure relationship and this is a token relationship. And I'm going to have to add any additional properties in the text area. And when I mean additional properties, I mean these different items. So I have these 3 repetitive tasks that I keep taking. And the more I take them, the more I can see what is considered repetitive, how it changes, how I need to do something a little weird, and it'll help me subconsciously think of a way to automate that. So now that I entered in my relationships, I want to enter in my names of the component. As you can see, something like this. I was thinking, because this is repeated items, I was thinking of attaching it, creating non-relatable things, kind of like tokens, but attaching these so there would be a finite number. But I think it would involve too much restructuring in order to say, I no longer want this to be a card, or I no longer want this to be a Next.js link. I want it to be some additional library link. That's why I took this approach. But it is easier. It is easy to jump between different approaches. That's just how it is. So I'm going to take just one record because this is the pattern that you'll see. It is all the same all the way down. Then what I like to do is something like this. So now all my names are going to go in here. I know this is the component ID and the rest of this stuff is irrelevant at this point. But doing it this way allows me to just kind of figure out what I'm doing. This is a motion name and it is motion.div. This is a grid item. H3. This has nothing. Do I have names? Okay, yep, that's how I did it. So this is dataset name columns. So we have a token in here, which will, because this will change. There we go. Accordion details. Grid container. Grid item. Table. Oh, this is static. Procedure doesn't have anything. Root doesn't have anything. That's not what the name looks like, so I'll have to do that. I can remove these. And that's that. So in just a few moments, I'll be able to test this out. I might be able to test out now. I don't know what's going to happen with the procedure not being defined. So we can go ahead and try it though, just to see where we are. Sweet. Yeah, let's just see what it's going to build. So we're looking for further down. Let's see where everything closes. Probably right here at around 219. In this next run, we're going to look for accordion or another grid container, accordion, and all that stuff. Right now we have 224 rows being returned. 268, so it did grow, and 218. 219 is what we were looking for. Another grid container, a motion, a grid item. Looks like something's going on with spacing. Oh. Awesome. That should be a value, and I did not define it as such. So 34. Say to decide I didn't assign these as values. It's still thinking it's an actual component, so it's trying to wrap it. It's doing what I told it to do. That is okay. So what is the other one after H3? Header name. Oh, don't freeze on me, come on. So that's actual value. I want to have these tables open up multiple times, so I'm going to close this stuff. $268 should reduce a little bit, did not. Are we still getting those? No. Oh yeah, that's right, because we still have the space. Awesome. I still don't like what's going on here. I'm not sure what has changed between this and this. Maybe it is something to do with sheets right now, because it looks really consistent. It is looking like that. Well, that last one had a space. See, there's some sort of weird item attached to it. Run it again. Wait, is it doing it for all of them? Oh, okay. I'm just losing my mind. I didn't see that. I know where that is. Oh. Got my BR. That needs to be a different type. Because that is not going to work. Boom. This should be the same as a divider, which is self-terminating, which is what? Bam. 30. Oh, just like the icons. Sweet. That should be self-terminating. We don't want this. We just want return class family type, event type, that's what we want. Excellent. So it's kind of interesting building this. Let's go back down to accordion. We have the summary, no token replacement yet. We haven't made that relationship. That is okay. Group container, table, row, cell, column name, view, UDT native. Close everything up. Open the body and close it, because there's no procedure that's being ran right here, which is perfectly okay. So I'm going to create that procedure real quick. How, and this should be really easy. Actually, I don't want to do it here. I kind of want to have that reserved for... No, I gotta stay on track. Okay. I have to add the properties real quick. I'm gonna forget. Where's the long one that I do not like? Car titles. Where's there it is. My motion. Sweet. So I'm going to add the properties. to it. Essentially do the same thing where I will take my stuff. I know that most of this does not matter. This is the component ID and this is the property. So what is the property? This is kind of where this comes into play, where we'll be doing stuff like this grid container. The property is column. This motion container is this crazy property. And stuff like that. So that's blocking my chat. That's our 1212. We do have another 1212 down here. Messed that up. This is column. Are all these direction columns? Yep. This is accordion. Does the accordion have a property? Yes. And it's not this anymore. It will be other styles. I'm expecting a lot of problems because not only am I kind of consolidating the styles that I have, I'm trying to do my best to reduce the code at the same time. The summary has an expand icon. The H3 has a specific classes attached to it. The header name doesn't have anything. I'll throw that away. Details doesn't have anything. Column 12. Table head row. They do not have any properties. Values do not have any properties. Table body doesn't have any properties. Procedure and root don't. Table row does not. And same thing. That's what I need. I shouldn't have deleted that row. Should have kept it around. But I'll grab one of these and it'll be okay. Now, we should start seeing the properties on like the accordion and things like that. And we do? Yeah. So I want to make sure I got that down before I got sidetracked. I know I still have to replace the tokens or relate the tokens, relate the procedure and stuff, but in order to relate the procedure, I need to have a procedure. So I'm going to use the foreign keys root basically as my base, and this is for a data point, and it's for the table body. Root through data points. Boom. So we'll need a data set ID because what's going to happen is it's going to iterate through that data set. Now in my very crappy ones, I have this doing what it needs to do already. So I'm going to kind of take some of that information. I don't like how I named it. So I'm going to take some of this table body. Let's say I need the incoming data set ID, the component root object. Well, I may not need the name. But what I definitely do not need is this cursor. So I want a different cursor. I'll call it data points. Local fast forward for this data. So I'm getting the data set ID. So sweet, that gives me quite a few things. Almost. That's not the full picture, is it? Yeah, that's what I thought. So we're going to get all in one. This is crazy. It's insane crazy. So what is happening, you ask, in this insane mess? This function requires a JSON payload, and it will send JSON back. The payload is the data point name, type ID, and data set, and it will transform this data point name, which is usually going to look like this, SYS or INT or STR. It'll actually transform it into what it looks like in the view. It's the same function used when I dynamically create these. All of these views are created by the system because no one wants to do that. So we make the system do it. But it's the same pattern. So instead of during the cursor iteration of pulling that value out, since I know it's going to return an item, I'll just do it right here. So now this is a name and not a JSON object. It looks pretty messy, but it's actually, well, I don't know how fast it is. I'll tell you in a second. Oh, that's this stuff, so it's right here. Boom. Let's see, how fast is this? Fast enough. Yeah, so it takes FLG archived and converts it into the dataset name archive flag. Like there are all these rules attached to it. So it doesn't appear that I am losing any sort of processing time in doing this. Maybe a little bit, but nothing noticeable. So, all right. I got to build that table. This is not what I want. I forgot what I called it. Damn. But it should be the only thing with a key name. There it is. So that's what I called it. And this will give me back an object that I will iterate through. So that means what I do want is just to copy this small section right here. Add it to my list. So for each data point, we're going to call this template. And this template is basically just this line. And it's going to build that using the same thing that we've already been doing, which includes all of the appropriate names and styling, except we have tokens right now. So when we run this without creating the token relationship, it's just going to be a bunch of that stuff, which will not compile, but it allows us to see, does this work? And that's what we want to know. Does this work? So for this, I essentially just need the other two pieces that I can find in here, actually. It's this stuff. Am I attaching UDT to it? How is that? Bam, right here. Okay. Okay. Sweet. And so for the most part, if I say I don't need any of that, I don't need the relationship type ID. Do I need a different relationship, the data one. I mean system one. So I can collect quite a few things from here. It might be this. And the relationship type. Wait, am I in the, okay, I'm in the right one. All right, and need for process name because we're not doing anything like that. All right, system relationship type, data point to data point, functional relationship about an object, and it's basically the user-defined type to a native SQL type. So in my tree, I do have this crazy structure of my user-defined types, primary key, taxonomy ID, but I also have the native SQL versions, And then just like sys.types, I think, it's just relating the two. So our system database is legitimately just a enhanced information schema. Alrighty, so go in for each of these items, get my stuffs, and then we will add to the payload because the payload's only going down. What we need, we did not set the tokens up, but we kind of did. In the sense that we know what it's going to be calling, so we might as well do that. Oh, I'm doing this wrong. No problems. Data point type. There we go. This kind of cool part about the system too is that the payload's not bidirectional, it's one direction. But the response is bidirectional. So any modifications to the response will be seen by the parent procedures, but any modifications to the payload disappear when that procedure stops. So I can make any sort of modifications in this procedure to send it down, but as the top level procedure that's running it continues to run it, nothing will happen. So this should be good enough. If I didn't forget anything, that should run just fine. So I do have to define a brand new record for a process. I do have these set up pretty nicely. I just gotta remember. There it is. I have it under, yeah. Boom. So 109 is our new process ID. I'm going to write that down because what we have left is, and I remember the specific data set number. I think all we have right now are the tokens. And then we should be able to see this in action. So have these defined, and I need to create a new set of tokens to match what's going on. All these are data set. Okay, so that's why that was messed up. Didn't hold shift on that. All right, so these are now tokens. Damn it. All right. Is that how I describe them? Get rid of this token. Awesome. Now, gotta look at that procedure again. I don't want to guess. Name underscore view type UDT native SQL. Sweet. So I have these new tokens. They are owned by the system. They are the token variety, all that good stuff. These will go into the component table because they are components. I need these new IDs. And now, what do I have to do? I have to create paths. AKA, where in the JSON payload am I going to find the value that you want me to replace? Well, path is 3, type 3, there we go. As you can see, I've already done some of these. Let's say for these specific components, where you can find them is the data point name. Oh, have to be case sensitive. The data point name view data point type UDT data point type native SQL. That's where you're going to find these in the payload. And finally, well, no, not last. 2 more reference relationships. No problems. I want to find this ID 164. I'm just going to do this one because it's super small, but I have to do another larger one. So reference type ID 9 is a component to a process ID. So I know this component, the procedure component 164, is related to the procedure 109. Yep, 109. So now that will run the procedure. Actually, yeah, let's see what it's going. What's it doing right now? 682. That's massive. Accordion summary, subtitle, no token replacement. We got to make sure to add those. Boom, there it's going. It's doing it. So we're getting one of these for every single row we have, which is exactly what we want. Close cell, close row, open cell, items, close, open, item 2. Close the entire row. Awesome. So that's, well, technically that's exactly what we want, but we need the relationship to, I believe it's 8. So I'll look that up real quick, but I'm going to copy this record because I'm 99% sure it is 8. I could do it here. Reference tree. We have a component to process relationship, and that's 9. So component to component relationship. It's a functional relationship, and it's a token. So that is number 8. Is this an old version? I don't need it. So we have 8 where the token is the child. That's why we have component to a component, meaning the child. So this child is a token. Awesome. So we should be able to take these tokens, say these are the data points that I have. Here's the child area. Boom. Now we got to find the component that they're connected to, which should be in order. So we can do every other. So we try to keep our things consistent. But we have one more, and I do remember it's the token is 132. We have one more in here, and it's this one right here. So we'll have 148 to 132, just because I remember 132 is the data set component. So the rest of this stuff remains the same. Oh, I could do that, but oh, come on. And delete. All right. So now we should be able to run this, and it works, I think. Sequence, event sequence, it's a sequence data type, big int. Does this change? It does. Display order, event display order type, send bar chart 20, cleaning flag type, It's a bit. Event ID cleanse to. Yeah, so it is actually filling out our tokens. Did we guess right on the data set? Come on, where's the columns? Description. Where are you? Group ID. It's under accordion. Bam. Event columns. So, crazy long video. Well, I don't know. What we have essentially completed so far in building a page is I've created a template that, let's actually do some side-by-side stuff, because I know there are some pieces left that I haven't done yet, but for the most part, this is what it is. Bam. I have to link components to an import so I can do a distinct, basically, a procedure that will give me a distinct list of the imports. So if a component requires an import, we want to relate it to it, because in case we reuse that component, we want to make sure that the import follows. However, we don't and we can't have 7 of these in a row, so we're just going to do a where in and talk about the cascaded relationship. However, aside from the imports, we have our using styles. So one of our imports is going to be this other styles instead of this nonsense. I have a template that I really like from Creative Tim, and I'm making my own custom styles on top of that for dark mode because it doesn't have dark mode in it. So we have our export default function, the name of it. We start using styles. We start our return process, our layout with the card bodies, grid containers. A lot of these are collapsed. But our different motions with different delays to kind of give that animated feel to it. Our database name, that is also a link to the appropriate page. Now these are uppercase and these are lowercase. So I hope Next.js doesn't mind. I'm going to build this as this. I don't want to do a lot of modifications. If it doesn't work, I can create another token. That's a lower. Or I can say, hey, this token requires an additional process. Please run it through a function. And in this case, the function will be lower. But we have all these pieces created. SQL is generating it for one data set that I pass in, which means that I can iterate through my data sets, create the payload as necessary, and run it. But even better is that this can be in a BCP statement, so it will build my file right inside my project. But yeah, I think aside from the import, we built it. Actually, I don't know. It won't work because I'm updating the styles and I don't have that created yet. But soon. And then I'll have a dataset template that I can basically copy for all the other pages. Because it just kind of, the very first few, I didn't want to record me stumbling through each of these sheets because it even hurts my mind. But then continually doing it, it gives me this path. As I'm talking about, the manual entry of data gives you an idea on how to not manually enter this stuff anymore. So, yeah. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to go grab some food because it's lunchtime. And I almost have SQL building my website.